Hi everyone! Thank you for tuning into another video. Today's video is going to be something I've been leading up to on Instagram, which is a plant-based breakfast sausage. And the only reason it's a breakfast sausage is because that's what I'm calling it. You can eat it at any time of day. It probably, depending upon spice, would be good with pasta or as any kind of like meatball or sausage substitute. I've already done the beginning prep of the video, and the sausages already are in the oven, and so we'll be pulling them out in about 10 to 15 minutes. I really am excited to share this recipe. It's something I've been working on now for a couple of weeks. It's not perfect. I am not a chef, obviously I'm not a professional chef. I have zero cooking training. These are just recipes that I developed for myself to try and be creative and have new ideas as how to use ingredients that are very common in my life and in my day. So yeah, I'm really excited to share this with you. I know I talked about live streaming this, and I'm really just gonna do an Instagram TV post, and that's because I had some issues during setup, and I basically had a 20-minute breakdown and did nothing but cry at my husband because I couldn't figure out a good setup that didn't involve one of my boobs getting in the way, and it was just a mess. You can actually see that I'm still a little bit flushed from it. Between that and the heat in the kitchen, our apartment's really small, and our oven's been preheated to 400 degrees now for almost an hour, so the dog is in the back sneezing, and we're all overheated. My husband went out to grab dinner, so it's just gonna be one of those evenings, right? So hopefully this will be really helpful for people who want new ideas of how to create something new in their house. It's a really, really adaptable recipe. I really like it, and I hope you do too. So if you're interested, stay tuned, and I'll see you on the outro. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another Cooking with Kristin episode. Today I'm going to be making a plant-based breakfast sausage that uses very few ingredients. It's a really easy recipe, and I got this recipe was inspired by a recipe that I got from the Mushroom Council of America. I think that's what it's called. Here, you can see it here. I'll show it to you very briefly. I'll also post it if you want to see it. You can't read this. I don't know why I'm showing it to you. But it's basically a pork sausage that I decided to make plant-based because I don't eat meat and my husband doesn't eat pork. We are a pork-free household. So, like I said, the recipe is very easy. All you're going to need is 8 ounces of white mushrooms, roughly chopped, a 14-ounce package or 400-gram package of tofu. And what I did here was I actually had this sitting all day. So when you work with tofu, one of the best things for you to do in order to really get a good flavor into the tofu is to do something called pressing. And so what you wind up doing is you take the block of tofu and you cut it into pieces and then press it between 2 towels. And what I do is I will put it on a plate and then wrap the tofu in a towel and put another plate on top of it, and then something heavy. And so it presses the water out of the tofu because tofu is very water dense. So by eliminating the water, you're just left with the curd, and that makes for a better flavor. And for ingredients, that's it. Just the 8 ounces of mushrooms, the 400 grams of tofu, or 14 ounces of tofu, depending upon how you go by your measurements, and then spices. It's very simple. You'll need a food processor, and for baking, I greased up a foil-covered baking sheet. Very simple. Okay. I preheated the oven to 400 degrees. And I'm pretty much ready to go. As you can see, I did pre-chop most of my mushrooms. I'm going to show you how I did it anyway. You're going to grind everything in a food processor for a while, so you don't have to make it a good chop, but I'm going to show you just how I did. I don't think anybody really cares. You know how to chop mushrooms. But 1, 2, and then I just did in a bunch of cuts. Like, very simple, nothing fancy. Throw it in. So the first step you're going to do after you preheat your oven to 400 degrees. I need to slow down with my speaking. You're going to take half of your mushrooms and put it in your food processor. Try not to make a huge mess like I am. I'm also trying to not get my boobs in the shot. Nobody needs to see that. About half of your mushrooms in to the food processor. And you're going to pulse the mushrooms and olive oil. You're going to put a little bit of olive oil on top. Okay? You're going to pulse this until it is about the consistency of ground meat. Okay? So not to a fine puree, but just till it's a bit crumbly. It's about the consistency that you want for the mushrooms. And all you're going to do is put it in a pan. That's all. Remove it, put it in a pan, frying pan, a big frying pan. You're going to need a lot of space. This lighting may be better. This is what it's going to look like. So it kind of has the consistency of ground meat. It definitely isn't. Now you're going to do the same thing with the other half of your mushrooms. Very easy. Get it in there, pulse it through. Olive oil. And be a little bit generous with the olive oil. I found that the few times I have done this recipe, the more olive oil in the grinding process, the better. It helps to add, it helps to grind the mushrooms a little bit more easily and give it more of that meat-ish consistency. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing with our second batch of mushrooms. What I recommend in between pulses to kind of scrape the sides. If the mushrooms are looking dry, which mine are looking a little dry, you want to add a little bit more olive oil. Put the top back on. Okay. So now we've got this done. So now we're done. We're done with the food processor. That's over. Easy. Put your mushrooms, I'm sorry, I'm completely blocking the angle of the shot. Put your mushrooms into the pan. Put all of this is now going off to the side so we can keep our workspace as clean as possible. Okay. Next up, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be cooking those mushrooms down a little bit. So we're going to be cooking those mushrooms down and adding spices to it. This is the exciting part. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn on the heat for our pan to a medium-high. I have an electric stove, so I wind up doing a I'm sorry, I like to keep my workspace clean. That's something I'm pretty compulsive about. So I'm going to be putting my burner on the number 5, which is literally medium for me. So leave it on medium heat and just let these kind of cook. We want them to mesh up. We want to start smelling the mushroom itself. In the meantime, we're going to be crumbling our tofu, okay? So the tofu in this recipe is essentially going to function as a meat base. So if you did want to do this using meat, this is when you would be using like a ground chicken or a ground turkey or even a ground pork, whatever you choose to do. I'm not doing that, obviously. This is tofu. So I'm literally just taking my hands, they are clean, and I'm just crumpling it like this. If the tofu has been pressed long enough and a lot of the moisture is out of it, it will crumble more easily. This is still a little wet. It's not completely dry, and that's going to serve us well for when we are making the patties and we're baking them. So this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna do this whole plate, and then by that time our mushrooms should be nice and flavorful. Smelling, they should be nice and aromatic. And then we're gonna mix everything together. So I'm gonna go ahead. Okay, I'm back and I finished with the tofu. It's nice and crumbly, and I'm sure you've also noticed that I have done a preliminary clean of my workspace, and that's just because it's very, very important to me that as I cook, my workspace stays clean. You can also see, I will show this to you closer, that the mushrooms are starting to brown a little bit. I cannot seem to manage to keep my boobs out of the shot. Sorry guys, but the mushrooms have started to brown a little bit. They've lost a little bit of their red color. I don't know if you can see it super well, but they've started to go from a little bit of like a pinkish color as they cook to a little bit more of a brown color, and this is perfect. This is when you're going to want to add your tofu, okay? So we're just going to scrape it all in, just dump the whole thing in there. Remember, my hands are clean. Just gonna cook it on through. Mix it all together. Get it really, really nice into a nice mixture. We want to have as equal a distribution of tofu and mushrooms per sausage patty as possible. That's really gonna help add in the flavor. Okay. We're mixing, we're mixing, we're mixing. And we're leaving this on medium heat. Everything is going to stay on medium heat for the time being because, quite frankly, we're almost done. Okay. Now what we're going to do, now that everything is pretty well mixed through, we're actually going to add our spices now. So what I really like about this recipe is that the spice includes fennel. I love fennel. I think it adds a great flavor to almost any food that you can prepare, but especially to plant-based dishes. It really adds a nice savory and garden flavor to the food. I usually don't measure out my herbs, my spices. I usually do it to taste. For this particular recipe, I do a healthy topful of my fennel seeds. Just dump that right in the middle. We're going to be doing salt. We're doing a pinch of salt, or I will show you what I do when I'm cooking for myself and my family. This is the amount of salt that I'm going to add. It's a small amount, but I would rather add salt when I sit down to eat if it needs it than add too much in a recipe. Now we're going to be doing black pepper. My husband is Egyptian, and he decided to label the spices in Arabic. So some of our spices are written in English, they're in the original packaging, and the ones that we've decanted into glass jars are now labeled in Arabic. So this says filfil aswad, which means a black pepper. Again, for this, I love black pepper, so I am going to do a healthy helping of this. And now we have oregano. Again, this is oregano. A nice helping of that as well, and we're sprinkling it over the mixture. Now we're going to mix it all together, and we're going to let it cook on medium heat until you can really smell the fennel and the oregano come out, which is not going to take much time. It's usually a pretty fast cook. These are already aromatic spices, so they're going to start to bring off a smell pretty soon after adding them to the pan. And what you can see, I don't know if you can see this, that boob just really wants to be on this video. I don't know if you can see so well. I'm going to bring up to the camera. It's kind of got a bit of a spongy feel to it, right? A spongy texture. And that's the mixture of the tofu with the mushrooms, okay? And this is actually good. This is what you want. You want it to be kind of spongy. You want it to be kind of springy, because what we're going to do within the next like 2 or 3 minutes, because I can already start to smell that fennel, is we're going to be making these into patties and then baking them. Take the heat off. Didn't need much time for that. And now, so we're taking it off the heat. We didn't need much time for that. So now what we're going to do is on, oh, that was hot, on a pre-greased, so now what we're going to do on a pre-greased baking pan, I took a baking pan, covered it with tin foil, and then wiped it down with olive oil. And that's going to help prevent the patties from sticking after they're cooked. So what we're going to wind up doing is we're going to take a spoonful of our tofu mushroom mix, roll it into a ball, make them into patties, and we're going to bake them at 400 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and make those patties. I'll show you how I do one first, and then I'm just going to go ahead and do the rest and stick them in the oven, okay? Okay, so it's been a few minutes. I've cleaned up my workspace. And I waited a few minutes because this mixture has to cool before you make it into patties, okay? It's been on the stovetop. It's kind of hot. So you want to cool so you don't burn your hands, okay? So this is all I do. Take a scoop, a scoopful, roll it into a ball like you would any other like meatball or anything else that you're making. Put it down on the foil. And this is all that we're going to do. We're just going to make little balls like this. Put them down, roll them up, Be gentle with this. It's not going to hold together with the same consistency that meat does. So if you're only familiar with working with meat, then that's not how it's going to function for you. Okay, it's going to function much differently. It's a different texture. So it's not going to pack into a ball as easily or as quickly. So you really have to gently toss it between your hands. So we're going to do this for the entire pan, okay? So I'm on my last patty, and what we're gonna do next, we've made little balls. We've made little balls. And so what we're gonna do next is we're gonna flatten them a little bit. Each of these, this recipe should make anywhere between a minimum of a dozen to as many as, I've gotten as many as 18 out of one of these recipes. It really does depend on the size of the patties that you're making. I wanted to speed this up a little bit, so I wound up having, I wound up getting 14 out of this recipe, but if I didn't make my last 5 or 6 so big, I probably would have gotten 16 or 17 even out of this recipe. So it's a pretty decent amount of yield for what you're using. So all we're gonna do is we're gonna take this and we're just gonna press it down very, very gently. So we don't want to destroy the integrity of the patty too much, and be very, very gentle. So it's gonna look more like a flattened circle as it is more than a patty, than an actual flat patty. And I do that instead of pressing right down in the middle, very lightly hitting the sides, okay? I'm sorry, I have allergies and I had a bit of an emotional breakdown before filming this, so I'm not sick, just a lunatic. Press around, and so what you'll see is the bigger the ball, the more likely you'll get it into a patty shape. It also has to do with the amount of moisture that's left in the patty itself. This is actually going to be really important. What's going to happen when you cook these is that if they're already cracked, a little bit cracked on the side, they're going to dry out a little faster. So we kind of want to keep them as uncracked as possible. Now these will not spread. They're going to cook as is, which actually makes it really great because you can fit a lot of these little balls onto one sheet. Okay, so when I'm all done with this, I'm going to be putting it in the oven, our preheated oven at 400 degrees, and I'm going to be cooking these for about 25 to 30 minutes. Now what I like to do here is, because I don't want them to dry out, I will actually have them covered with another piece of tin foil for the first half of the baking. And then at about the 15-minute mark, I'll go in and take a look at them and see how far along they are. If they are pretty far along still, or if they're not too far along yet, meaning they haven't dried out or they're not that cooked yet, I'll uncover them and rotate the pan and let them cook for another 10 to 15 minutes, checking them periodically to make sure they're not overcooked. The really great thing about these is that obviously when you pull them out of the pan, as they're cooling, the heat of the pan is going to keep cooking them more. So it's better if they're a little undercooked coming out of the oven than they are being overcooked, because then they're just going to dry out. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to pop these in the oven, I'm going to rotate them at 15 minutes, check them again, and hopefully after about 30 minutes or so, we're going to have a really, really great set of plant-based sausage. Okay, so I tried to show this in the video before, and the lighting just wasn't letting it work. This is the recipe that served as inspiration for me to create this plant-based sausage. This is a recipe that I was given at a convention. It's just a recipe card from the Mushroom Council of America. So it's called their blended breakfast sausage, and it uses mushrooms, olive oil, pork in the original recipe, but I substituted that for tofu because I don't eat meat and my husband doesn't eat pork. So regardless of for whom I'm prepping this recipe, neither of us are eating pork. Pork is not eaten in our home. So pork got crossed out, and I am using tofu as a substitute. Oregano, fennel seeds, ground black pepper, and salt. It's a really easy recipe. I've made some modifications. Obviously, bringing in tofu instead of pork. I've also changed this part. I do not broil my patties, rather I bake them at 400 degrees for 30 minutes. I don't like to broil food. I just don't like the way it winds up tasting, especially if it's plant-based, because it just dries out a lot faster than meat, from my experience. And then the rest is pretty much the same. There's nothing really different except for broiling. I bake. So this is the recipe. If you want to read it as it is verbatim, please feel free to pause right here and you can get a snapshot on your screen. Okie dokie, so these bad boys are done. And the way you can tell that they're done, not just by the color on the top, they're a little bit browner, but I'm going to show you on the sides. See how the sausage patty is starting to, right there, it's starting to pull away from the foil? That's how you know that they're done. Okay, so you don't want to pull them off too early or pull them out of the oven too early, because obviously they won't be cooked and they'll be kind of mushy and they'll fall apart. So I'm going to leave them on the pan for another maybe minute or two, and then I'm just going to take this foil and transfer it to my countertop, and that's where I'm going to leave the patties to cool. So when they're completely cooled, I'll film another shot. You can see what they look like on the inside, and that's going to be it. Okay, so my patties are completely cooled and they're ready to come off the foil, and I'm going to show you a trick that I've developed over my experience with a lot of plant-based recipes. When the patty can just slide right back and forth across the foil, that's when you know it's ready. Now you have to be delicate when you take them off of the foil and put them on your dish or into your pan, however you're going to be storing them, because they may fall apart. They are pretty delicate. But other than that, you're good to go. Okay, so that's the end of the video. If you liked this recipe, or you think it's inspiring, or you just want to see more content like this, please give me a like, and hit the subscribe button. I'm sorry, I keep looking over my phone because the puppy has jumped up on the couch where he's not supposed to be. Yeah, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe, and hopefully I will see you in another video soon. Okay, thanks. Have a great day. Bye.